For the very first time in the history of the CFP Eliminator within the College Football Red Zone YouTube channel, we will have an elimination game taking place on the CW as there is a 3:30 kickoff happening during the course of the College Football Red Zone stream that's happening this Saturday, where the Fresno State Bulldogs, fresh off of their very first win of the season, well, they're going to be taking on the Oregon State Beavers in a game that could very well be a future conference matchup, right? That it is considered a non-conference for this year. However, because of all of the conference realignment that's been happening out on the West Coast, Fresno State is going to be entering the Pac-12 starting next season. So, right off the bat, at least for Oregon State, it's going to be a big game for them from a threefold perspective, right? One, first and foremost, this is going to be a CFP eliminator game with the loser of this game likely not going to be able to make the playoffs. And this is even more important for Oregon State in their case because they're not going to have the benefit of getting a automatic bid into the CFP because their conference that is composed of just them and Washington State, that's just not big enough to get an automatic bid right now. So the only way that Oregon State can get in is through an at-large bid, and that's going to require them to win outright in order to make that happen, especially in the context of what happened in the previous week with really an embarrassing home loss to a Cal team where you do see the California Bears, who honestly just had one of the more difficult off seasons in memory. They come into your building, they kick your ass, so it's going to put some early pressure on this team that's already been reshaped by a fair amount of roster turnover under second-year head coach Trent Bray. But then when you look over onto the other side, right, Fresno State, they seem to be coming in with a lot more confidence, right? Fresno State, we saw them in week number 0, one of the few games that happened over the course of week 0, and they didn't look very good against Kansas. They looked like they had some flaws on their team, but then they came in against Georgia Southern, maybe a little bit more doubted because of how they played against Kansas. Georgia Southern having those higher expectations within the confines of the Sun Belt, and then they give them a shellacking on the other end, 42-14, and they were able to have a dominant run game a week after they were able to only put up like 31 rushing yards on the ground again against Kansas. So you see for Oregon State, it's a must-win game for them from a standpoint of it really helps from an optics standpoint because Fresno State is getting ready to join your conference next year. You're already in a position to where you are coming in a win-out scenario. You have to win out to just be considered, even at 11-1 for Oregon State. I don't even know if that automatically gets them into the CFP at that point. And then topping off all of that, this was just a team that was just unquestionably considered a Power 5 school just 2 years ago. Is that still the case, or is Oregon State, is this really the part where we start to see them being relegated down to a G6 scenario? So, lots of interesting storylines going into this matchup between Fresno State and Oregon State moving forward. But let's talk about some of those keys to this game, and in terms of if you're Oregon State and you want to get that first win of the year, how are you going to try to make that happen? Well, first and foremost, I think they need to do a much better job of communication on the defensive side of the football because, let's face it, Cal did lose a tremendous amount of firepower during the spring transfer portal window in which we saw Fernando Mendoza did end up going ahead and in playing, he ends up transferring over to Indiana, but then they also lost Jaden Ott, their starting tailback. He moves over to Oklahoma during the spring transfer portal window as well, and so you lose all of his firepower, and they still manage to find a way to hang up 30 points on you. I mean, that's just gross, and that needs to be tightened up. And then you look over on the offensive side of the ball too. They need to find ways to make explosive plays happen because they actually had a similar number of total yards that Cal did. However, those lack of explosive plays that really forced more methodical drives and less points on the board, I think really was a key in terms of Oregon State's downfall last Saturday. Meanwhile, if you're Fresno State and you're trying to build your first winning streak of the season, basically, can you take what you accomplished in the Georgia Southern game and utilize that same game script? Really, and that really is essentially controlling the trenches on both sides of the ball with that run game, play physical defense on top of taking advantage of mistakes made by the other team. Essentially, playing almost complementary football because EJ Warner definitely can make plays for you, but at the same time, he's better suited as a game manager. And he was more of a game manager last week against Georgia Southern, and it seemed to work out pretty well there, from that perspective, right? So let's go ahead and pull up the model and see what we have going on here. So as of me recording this video, both taking a look at what's going on FanDuel as well as our internal power rating metrics that we have going on right now. Oregon State, both scenarios are a very short favorite. Right now on FanDuel, Oregon State is listed as a 2.5-point favorite. We think that it's a little bit tighter, to be honest with you, with it being more of a 1.5. So we think that there's more likely than not Fresno State is going to cover. But not only am I thinking that Fresno State covers, I'm going to agree with the model from that standpoint. I'm actually going to go ahead and even take it a step further. I think Fresno State, they're coming in with a lot of confidence given how they're able to dominate against Georgia Southern, who is expected to be one of the better teams in the Sun Belt this year. And while that first game hasn't worked out for the Eagles, I'm sure they're going to be just fine. Meanwhile, Oregon State, they turn over the ball multiple times as well. That could be a little bit more of a concern as they're still trying to work some of those new pieces into that offense. Malik Murphy specifically transferring in from Duke, and he didn't have a necessarily spectacular game. So with both of those things in mind, and even though Oregon State does have the benefit of playing at Razor Stadium, I think this is a rarity where we do see Oregon State take that second consecutive loss in their home building, as I think Fresno State walks in. I think they get another win on the road. They pull off a 27-24 victory, and what I think should be somewhat of a thriller at Razor Stadium.